Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. Hadn't had this little unmarked Danish out for a while. This nice little billiard that a friend gave me as an estate pipe that I restored. Just had to smoke this guy for a while, so I wanted to do that. So eager to get into a topic with you today that's very, very near and dear to my heart, and it references a book that I have talked about with many, many people many, many times. So as always, let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. My beloved poet Alexander Pope once wrote, "'Tis hard to say if greater want of skill appear in writing or in judging ill." And I have to say, 'tis hard to say if I have referenced a book more than Marianne Wolf's Proust and the Squid, the story and science of the reading brain. Love this for many, many reasons. Read it through, highlighted. The highlighter started to fade, so it may not pick up on the video there, but highlighted many, many things, margin notes, that kind of stuff. And then, let's see, she wrote this in 2007. And I had a chance to go hear her after that. She was giving a talk somewhere in Indianapolis, and I and a friend went to go see her. She was doing some meet and greet stuff afterwards. Well, I brought my book. Well, when she saw it, she opened it up and saw all my highlights and margin notes, and she says, "Ooh, a real reader." You know, she is. At the time, she was a cognitive neuroscientist at Tufts University, focusing on dyslexia and reading. And she wrote in, she says, "To Steve, fellow lover of words and children, best of wishes." There's several theses in this book. She starts off talking about the brain and how the human brain developed over time. She goes back to antiquity. She talks about the Phoenicians. She talks about the Egyptians. She talks about the Greeks. Development of language systems and how the brain really develops. When it reads, and I will say, the opening sentence has to be one of my favorites. "I have lived my life in the service of words." That could be the epitaph on my tombstone. That is absolutely accurate for me. I've lived my life in the service of words. And she starts right off. She says, "Reading can be learned only because of the brain's plastic design. And when reading takes place, that individual brain is forever changed, both physiologically and intellectually. For example, at the neuronal level, a person who learns to read in Chinese uses a very particular set of neuronal connections that differ in significant ways from the pathways used in reading English." Now, the highlighter started to fade, so it may not pick up on the video there, but highlighted many, many things, margin notes, that kind of stuff. And then, let's see, she wrote this in 2007. And I had a chance to go hear her after that. She was giving a talk somewhere in Indianapolis, and I and a friend went to go see her. She was doing some meet and greet stuff afterwards. Well, I brought my book. Well, when she saw it, she opened it up and saw all my highlights and margin notes, and she says, "Ooh, a real reader." You know, she is. At the time, she was a cognitive neuroscientist at Tufts University, focusing on dyslexia and reading. And she wrote in, she says, "To Steve, fellow lover of words and children, best of wishes." There's several really, there are several theses in this book. She starts off talking about the brain and how the human brain developed over time. She goes back to antiquity. She talks about the Phoenicians. She talks about the Egyptians. She talks about the Greeks. Development of language systems and how the brain really develops. When it reads, and I will say, the opening sentence has to be one of my favorites. I have lived my life in the service of words. That could be the epitaph on my tombstone. That is absolutely accurate for me. I've lived my life in the service of words. And she starts right off. She says, reading can be learned only because of the brain's plastic design. And when reading takes place, that individual brain is forever changed, both physiologically and intellectually. For example, at the neuronal level, a person who learns to read in Chinese uses a very particular set of neuronal connections that differ in significant ways from the pathways used in reading English. Well, she goes on from there, and deeply fascinating stuff. The first thing, though, that I want to draw out that she said and talked about was the difference in alphabets. And I feel that I've talked about this before. I think I may have done an episode on the Star Trek The Next Generation episode called Darmok, in which case I would have referenced this book. But she talks about the power of different languages. And you say, well, how could a language be more or less powerful than another? Don't all languages do the same thing? Words describe things, ideas, and then we burble, we babble those words to other people. They hear those words, and we have communication. So how could one language be more or less powerful? She makes a distinction between the alphabetic language of Greece, ancient Greece, compared with cuneiform, compared with the hieroglyphics of Egyptian. And she makes a good point. If you're dealing in symbols or pictograms, basically, okay, well, I should have brought up my first pipe lighter. It has a little symbol of the pipe on it. That little pipe means one thing. It means a pipe. And that's it. Now, you can combine symbols and pictures and so forth in lots of different ways, but there is a limitation. The power of ancient Greek and then all other alphabetic languages is that they really function like atoms. So here we'll just use the English alphabet, for example. You've got 26 letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so forth. Well, with the individual letters, you can combine and recombine them in an infinite variety of ways to create an infinite variety of words to then not only to describe reality, but also to come up with new ideas. Things that just you couldn't cognitively have thought of if you had a more limited linguistic system. So I think that's fascinating. But the part I think that has captured me the most is something she starts talking about maybe midway through the book. My wife likes her too. In fact, my wife has read another of her books. I should have brought it out of the house. My wife's references it all the time as well. It's called Reader Come Home. So she's still into the work of reading and so forth. But let's see here. She has a section, it's about halfway through here, titled The War on Word Poverty. She says, unbeknownst to them or their families, children who grow up in environments with few or no literacy experiences are already playing catch-up when they enter kindergarten and the primary grades. When words are not heard, concepts are not learned. When syntactic forms are never encountered, there is less knowledge about the relationship of events in a story. When story forms are never known, there is less ability to infer and to predict. When cultural traditions and the feelings of others are never experienced, there is less understanding of what other people feel. I'm going to stop right there. I've mentioned one of my grandmothers before, who graduated high school in 1928. She never went on to college. She took a couple of math classes at a business school, but she was a bank teller. But she was a voracious reader and enjoyed reading well up into her later years. And she always said, reading can take me anywhere. I can go anywhere in books. That was her phrase. I can go anywhere in books. I don't care how well traveled you are. You can certainly travel more and experience more ideas, more perspectives through reading than you would ever be able to get just out in the world. So children who don't have that lack that. They lack syntactic relationships. They don't have the ability to predict and infer. So, when, you've heard a few stories about, here's dark and the bad guy's coming around the corner. Ooh, what's going to happen next? Right? They don't have that. And especially, she says, when cultural traditions and feelings of others are never experienced. So you're not reading stories that allow you to go into the experiences of other people. There's less understanding of what other people feel. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Disturbing. A chilling finding in a study of one California community exposes a bleak reality with serious implications. By 5 years of age, some children from impoverished language environments have heard 32 million fewer words spoken to them than the average middle-class child. Now, I don't need to share anything more. I'm going to. But she doesn't say that a child of 5 knows 32 million words. Not at all. But just think about all the words. If we did a transcript, well, you can see the transcript if you click on the little button at the bottom of the YouTube video here. How many words have I already used in this video? Let's count. Let's get this guy lit. And, we won't repeat let's, we won't repeat the word to, talking. Just in my opening little phrase right there, there's 8 separate words. All right. And over the course of a day, course of a few years, children that are around lots of words being read to, being spoken to, there can be a 32 million word gap by the time of age 5. Well, that's extraordinary, and you can see right away what an extraordinary difference that is going to have to make in the child's academic development. She goes on. Yet another study concerns books in the home. Any kind of books. In the most underprivileged community, in a survey of 3 communities in Los Angeles, there were startling differences in how many books were available to children. In the most underprivileged community, no children's books were found in the home. In the low to middle income community, there were on average 3 books. And in the affluent community, there were around 200 books. The sheer availability of books will have a crushing effect on the word knowledge and world knowledge that should be learned in these early years. Now, we're talking about just having the books in the home. All right. She talks about a Canadian psychologist who studied the consequences of lower vocabulary levels in younger children. He finds that, quote, children who come to kindergarten in the bottom 25th percentile of vocabulary generally remain behind the other children in both vocabulary and reading comprehension. By grade 6, approximately 3 full grades separate them from their average peers in both vocabulary and reading comprehension. That's what I've talked about the most with people in referencing Wolf's book. There is simply no, there's no a lot of things. There's no estimating the value of having books in the home, of reading to children when they're younger. She talks at some point about any beloved caregiver reading to children. Doesn't matter. Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, babysitter. And if you go back to St. Augustine or St. Augustine, his classic work, The Confessions, he has a part early on where he talks about, as a native Latin speaker, learning to read Greek and learning to read Latin. And he talks about how he hated to learn Greek because he learned Greek at school. And it was taught through threats and punishments and all this kind of stuff. And he says, but I learned Latin, he says, through people who loved me as a boy, who joked and smiled and so forth. So, again, it's just impossible to talk about how valuable it is to read to younger people. So, I really want to talk about this second part. It's not so much about the power of language. I've touched on that before, but I want to ask you this. What do you think about those statistics? What do you think about the statistics that children from, as she says, a word-impoverished background can come to school, kindergarten, or could come to age 5, with a 32 million word gap between just words that they have heard compared with their peers who come from families and situations where more words are spoken and read? What do you make of the fact that a child can come to school with such a gap, and that by age 6 there's a 3 grade level gap, and at some point that just becomes insurmountable? What's your thought on that? Now, for me, I've mentioned before, someone spoke at a conference one time and talked about Popeye the Sailor Man and said, that's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. And that's one of the things I can't stand no more. Right? I care very much about words and literacy. Now, yes, I wrote books for our children. Not everybody's going to do that. But anybody can read to their children, to their grandchildren, to their nieces, to their nephews. So I'm going to encourage you. I don't think I'm going to end with a question this time. I'm going to end with an encouragement. Read to the young people in your life. Family, maybe children of friends, offer to give mom and dad a night out and babysit for them, and then read them stories. Give books to young parents or for their children as birthday gifts, as Christmas gifts. Help them to build those early libraries, those little cardboard books that little kids can look at and then chew on, right? The cardboard books, and then the pop-up books, and books that have little tactile things in them. And I remember our son had a little book when he was a boy, a version of All Creatures Great and Small, and it had there's a little bit of cotton in there on the sheet, and you could feel that, and right, and it was very, very tactile, sensory. Do that for the young people around you, and you will be doing them a tremendous service for the rest of their lives. Folks, as Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.